application of Ashwood Solar, LLC for a certificate of construction for an approximately 86 megawatt merchant electric solar generating facility in Lyon County, Kentucky, pursuant to KRS 278.700 and 807 Kentucky Administrative Regulation 5:110. My name is Michael Schmidt. I'm chairman of the Kentucky Public Service Commission and also serve as chairman for the Kentucky State Board on Electric Generation and Transmission Siting. I will be presiding today, and joining me via video conferencing are the other 6 board members, and they are Kent Chandler, Vice Chairman of the Public Service Commission, Dr. Talina Matthews, Commissioner of the Public Service Commission, John Lyons, Deputy Secretary of the Energy and Environment Cabinet, serving as proxy for Secretary Rebecca Goodman, Charlie Rowland, Executive Advisor with the Cabinet for Economic Development, serving as proxy for Interim Secretary Larry Hayes, Lyon County Judge Executive Wade White, first ad hoc appointee, and Robin Hurst, second ad hoc appointee. At this time, I would normally caution attendees to please set your cellular phones to silent mode or turn them off. Due to the current state of emergency in Kentucky, the Siting Board is hosting this hearing via video conferencing. Since this continues to be a learning experience for everyone, there are a few suggestions I would offer. In addition to the normal courtesies regarding cell phones, these tips may help with clarity and avoid feedback issues for the video conference hearing. Mute your microphone if you are not speaking. Attorneys, when interjecting, please state your name so the video record is clear. If you use a phone for the audio and a computer for the video, turn off the computer audio, otherwise there will be feedback. If you're in a room with several people on their own computers, turn off the computer audio for all but one computer, otherwise there will be feedback. If another participant is in a nearby office, close the doors between the offices. Sound carries further than one thinks, which can also cause feedback. Once in the GoToMeeting software platform, go to your settings. The icon looks like a gear to ensure the microphone setting is on the microphone you are using. There's a pull-down menu feature in GoToMeeting settings that will list the available microphones. Use wired headphones or wired earbuds for better sound quality. Wired is preferred because the wireless devices may lose power depending upon the length of the hearing. Keep a charger nearby in case your battery runs low. And please alert the Siting Board if you're experiencing technology failure that prevents your participation at any time in the proceedings. Attorneys should contact staff at the previously provided cell phone number. The hearing today is for the purpose of taking evidence on Ashwood Solar's application requesting a certificate of construction for an 86 megawatt merchant electric generating solar facility to be located in Lyon County, Kentucky. This time we will have entry of appearance of counsel. Given the unique challenges of conducting a video hearing, I will also request that each party's counsel also identify their witnesses at this time. Mr. Gardner, Mr. Osterloh, would you please identify yourselves, your client, and the witnesses who will be available to testify this morning?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Siting Board. My name is Todd Osterloh, along with Jim Gardner with the Sturgill Turner Law Firm out of Lexington, representing Ashwood Solar 1. Also present is Max Friedman, who is an Assistant General Counsel with RWE. As for our witnesses, we have 4 or 5 witnesses today. Josh McNeely, Kevin Macklin, Christy Thomas, all 3 of them are with RWE. And then Josh Adams and Courtney DeHoney are with Stantec.
Thank you. And for staff?
One went on behalf of staff.
Okay, thank you. I've checked the file and I see that notice of this public hearing has been given and has been filed into the record. I see also that there are maybe 2 outstanding or 3 outstanding motions, an outstanding confidentiality petition and a motion for deviation. Mr. Osterloh or Mr. Gardner, are there any other outstanding motions?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. As we've indicated on other occasions, if during the conduct of this hearing, anybody asks a question or gets into a matter that you feel gets close to a subject that is within the scope of a confidentiality petition, please let us know so that we can protect your position on confidentiality, and then we'll go into confidential session. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Now, I don't know, we've asked that any requests to speak from members of the public be made at least 30 minutes prior to the start of the hearing. Mr. Nguyen, do we know if any member of the public is asked to speak?
There have been no one, Your Honor.
So there'll be no public comments at this hearing, but members of the public who may want to make a comment may always do so in writing by sending their comments by mail or email to the Kentucky Public Service Commission. Our email address, or look on our website for our address and email address. The website is psc.ky.gov. Right, Mr. Gardner or Mr. Osterloh, I don't know who will take the lead on this. Please introduce your first witness to be sworn in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our first witness is Josh McNeely.
Okay, would you please, Mr. McNeely, I see you in the bottom left corner of my screen. Would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Osterloh, you may ask.
Thank you. Mr. McNeely, would you please state your name for the record?
Joshua McNeely.
What is your business title and for whom do you work?
I work for RWE. My business title is Senior Development Manager.
What is your business address?
353 North Clark, floor 30, Chicago, Illinois, 60654.
And can you describe your role to the siting board with respect to this project?
So I am the lead developer for RWE on the Ashwood Solar 1 project. So I manage all aspects of development through permitting into construction.
And can you provide the siting board with a little bit of background about this project and your company?
Sure, I'm going to share my screen if you guys don't mind to give you guys a couple slides on RWE and the project. So some of you guys may be familiar with RWE as a company. The company itself is a utility based out of Germany. So we are, in part formed by a merger that happened with E.ON in late 2019. Both E.ON and RWE are familiar with the state of Kentucky. RWE being the former owner of Kentucky American Water, and E.ON being the former owner of Louisville Gas and Electric. In the renewables, we focus in four main markets and are number 2 globally in offshore wind. We have presence in 4 different continents and are a vertically integrated utility with roughly 2.9 gigawatts of projects under construction and a 22 gigawatt pipeline. In the renewable portfolio, we have approximately 9 gigawatts under ownership across 4 technologies I mentioned, both onshore wind, offshore wind, utility scale solar PV, and energy storage. And those operate across the 3 main geographies, the Americas, Europe, and Asia Pacific. As I mentioned, we are a vertically integrated utility, so we manage all aspects of development from origination through engineering, construction, commercialization, and operation. And then just being a utility, having a utility background, obviously we have an unconditional focus on health and safety. little bit about our presence across the 2 sectors I mentioned, or the 4 sectors I mentioned. So we are, as I mentioned, number 2 in offshore wind. We have approximately 2.5 gigawatts under ownership and manage another 800 megawatts, and have a robust pipeline of 7.3 gigawatts. In onshore wind, we have approximately 6.3 gigawatts under ownership, the majority of which is located in the United States, and are ranked number 7 globally. And then in solar and energy storage, we have a robust pipeline. We've got roughly 500 megawatts in operation or under construction, and another 5 gigawatt pipeline behind that. But why we're here today is to talk about the Ashwood Solar 1 project. So the Ashwood Solar 1 project is, as we've mentioned, it's approximately 900 acres of solar panels, which will consist of 86 megawatts. It's located in Lyon County, north of Eddyville and south of Fredonia. Our properties that we have under long-term lease border the Western Kentucky Correctional Complex and are just south of the Fredonia Valley Quarry. I don't know how much you guys want me to get into the project, but we do have a signed interconnection agreement that with Louisville Gas and Electric into the South Livingston to Paducah line. The project also has a long-term power purchase agreement for 2/3 of the power to Kentucky Municipal Electric Agency. So KYMEA is buying that. That equates to approximately 14% of the KYMEA load. The project itself, as we've stated in previous documents provided to the PSC and its staff, will create approximately 100 to 200 local construction jobs. We're looking at a 9 to 12 month construction window. It will supply local tax revenue. We're looking at approximately 40-year leases if all extensions are excised, and see quite a few indirect impacts and benefits to the local communities, mostly spurred by the construction of the plant. I think we try to address a few of the issues pertaining to viewshed with proposed vegetative screening. We've also proposed some planted pollinators, and are looking at using native seeding to mitigate any erosion. I think lastly, we were proposing a decommissioning bond on the project as well.
Great. Thank you, Mr. McNeely. Mr. Chairman, I believe it's appropriate now at this time for Mr. McNeely to answer any questions from the staff of the siting board.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Nguyen, questions?
Yes, good morning, Mr. McNeely. So you're the senior development manager that manages all aspects of this particular solar project, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And would you be the person that's most knowledgeable about the nearby property owners, their locations in relation to where the proposed project will be?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So just a couple of questions to confirm about the nearby property owners. So are there 21 non-participating residential properties that are adjacent to the proposed solar project?
That sounds correct, but I do not recollect the exact number.
Okay. And I apologize, I was on mute, but I guess you could hear me. Can you hear me a little better now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then with respect to the closest non-participating residential property, would that be 126 feet from the proposed solar facility?
I believe that sounds correct.
Okay. And by that, would that be from the boundary or from the closest solar panel or any other physical asset of the solar project?
So I believe Josh Adams, who is also online,
Okay.
performed the noise study and has those specific measurements. I do believe it was from the property boundary, though.
Okay. And then with respect to the closest residential neighborhood, there's the Breezy Loop neighborhood that's located in the southern part of the project. That is located within 2,000 feet of the solar facility. Is that correct as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the closest residence within that Breezy Loop neighborhood to the project boundary, would that be 230 feet? I think you're on mute, Mr. McNeely.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I believe there was a proposed 250-foot setback from that neighborhood. But again, I think Josh Adams from Stantec can
Okay.
properly accompany your question.
Yeah, so there were two measurements. There was 230 feet from the project boundary, but yet, and you're right that there's a 250 feet, I guess, requirement for the project that's imposed by RWE or Ashwood Solar. But there's also a distance measuring to the nearest solar panel of 338 feet. So do you think Josh Adams would be the person that could confirm that?
I think he would be best suited to confirm that.
Okay. And then lastly, there's also the new Bethel Baptist Church, which is approximately 570 to 580 feet from the project boundary as well. Is that correct?
That sounds correct, yes.
Okay. With respect to these non-participating residential property owners, as well as the church, could you state whether Ashwood Solar has directly contacted these property owners outside of the contact that's been made to publish notice of the public meeting? In addition to that, has there been any other direct contact made by Ashwood Solar to these property owners to inform them of the potential noise and visual impacts associated with the proposed solar facility, both during construction and during operations?
So yes, sir. And in between the issuance of the BBC consultant report and today's hearing, we've reached out to the judge executive, Judge Wade White, and also the local magistrate, Quinn Sutton. We've worked in collaboration with both Mr. Sutton and Judge White to deal with any concerns in the community by their constituents. I think initially there was four areas of concern that were brought up to the siting board, specific for viewshed issues. After discussing those with Judge White and also with the magistrate, Mr. Sutton, we've identified that there was only three areas of concern. I think we have addressed a potential mitigation measure that has appeased the local constituents, and I would like Judge White to talk to that, but we proposed some additional setbacks that were not initially shown to the siting board in three of those areas that voiced additional concern. I think it equated to the removal of panels in one area to the southwest and removal of panels to the northwest, and then one area just north of the Breezy Loop neighborhood.
Okay, so
Mr. Newman, is that in the record?
no, I probably want to ask that as a post-hearing data request. To the extent that, and this is in follow-up to, I guess, a data request that was issued, the second data request issued to Ashwood Solar. Let me bring up the item number. So it's Siding Board staff's second data request to Ashwood Solar. It's item number 6, which identified 4 properties, 4 residential properties in regards to the proximity of the panels to those residential properties. And your response was addressing those 4 residential properties?
That's correct.
Okay. As a post-hearing data request, could I request, the discussions that you've had, that Ashwood Solar's had with these property owners, the concerns that were expressed, and how Ashwood Solar is proposing to address those concerns?
Absolutely. So the discussions themselves happened between the local judge executive and Quinn Sutton on our behalf. But we can provide you with the proposed setback areas that have been agreed upon with those neighboring landowners.
Okay. Yeah, to the extent what the resolution was arrived at to address those property owners' concern, and whether those property owners are satisfied with that proposed resolution.
Sure. I think, again, Judge Executive Wade White can speak to whether those landowners were content or not. My understanding is that they were very satisfied with what we're proposing. I do have a map that shows the proposed setback areas, if you'd like me to share it with you now.
Sure.
I'd like to see it.
Sure.
So there was initially, there was 4 areas. We provided visual simulations as part of the initial data request from BEC, the Siding Board consultant. There was 4 areas that were identified as concern from local adjoining neighbors. I believe that was filed by Judge Executive Wade White. After further communication with those landowners via Judge Executive Wade White and the magistrate, Mr. Quinn Sutton, we'd identified that there was only 3 areas of concern. One of the neighbors said that they were satisfied with our proposed vegetative screening. Those 3 areas were Mr. Williams in the northeast or northwest, the Englers in the southwest, and then another residence just north of Breezy Loop. What we've identified here in red are proposed exclusion areas. They're approximately to the northwest. It's approximately a 15-acre or 14-acre carve-out where we are proposing not to put panels. The southern area, due to, I think, increased costs from the construction aspect, if we had to limit panels down there, we decided to remove this parcel completely in the southwest, so away from Mrs. English house. And then we are proposing roughly a 13-acre setback around this house north of Breezy Loop.
So the third home that you, could you keep that? Yeah. Yeah, so the third home that you mentioned, that's on the screen now, that's just above the 161 kV line. Is that the residence that is 126 feet from the, that would have been 126 feet from the proposed project, either boundary or solar panel?
I believe that's correct.
Okay, so now there's not going to be any panels that are going to be built within that red area, that red boundaried area.
Correct. The 3 red areas that you are seeing on the screen are proposed areas for no panels.
Okay. would you know now what the closest, what the distance would be to the, for this property? What the distance would be to the nearest panel?
I do not know, but I can find that out very shortly.
Yeah, as part of the post-hearing data request, could you also provide that information in terms of what the closest distance to the panel would be for each of the residences affected?
Yes.
Okay. In addition to these property owners, has Ashwood Solar contacted any other property owners that are adjacent to the proposed facility, but are not part of the participating landowners?
In one form or fashion, yes. So we had initially reached out to the majority of the adjoining landowners as part of our initial development, starting back in 2016. Some of those larger landowners declined to participate in the project. And we've had, routine communication with neighbors. I cannot say that we've called every single one, but we have done our best to reach out to those adjoining neighbors.
Okay, for those property owners that Ashwood Solar reached out to, did you all provided them information with respect to the potential view shed impacts or the noise impacts associated with the proposed solar project, both during construction and also during operations?
We have communicated that, via our initial outreach and also via our town hall meeting.
Okay. Would it be okay? I don't need the map anymore, so you can discontinue the screen sharing for now. So during those contacts with those property owners, were there any concerns expressed by those property owners? Any issues related to the company?
No, the only concerns, there was actually only 2 concerns voiced to us directly. There's been, and then the other concerns came from indirect voicing relayed by both the judge executive and the magistrate. The 2 individuals that did reach out to us personally were Ms. Ingler to the southeast, or the southwest, and Mr. Williams to the northwest. And they were the only 2 that voiced concern directly to the company.
Okay. And those concerns were addressed by the company?
We believe yes, and based on, I think, some clarity from the judge executive, that can be confirmed.
Okay. So did you all reach out to the New Bethel Baptist Church as well, directly?
We have had no personal communication with the Baptist Church.
Okay. So you're not aware if there have been any concerns or issues that might have been raised by the church?
I am unaware. I would defer to the judge executive.
And the closest property to an inverter is approximately, is it 500 feet or is it 400 feet, do you recall?
I would defer to Josh Adams, who performed the noise study.
Okay. In your slide that you had presented earlier with respect to ROE's projects, particularly the solar projects here in the U.S. I noted that there were 157 megawatts worth of solar projects. Is that correct in the U.S.?
I believe that to be correct. We do have another, 200 megawatt project that is currently in construction with Georgia Power. So that number is shortly changing.
Okay. So with respect to the solar projects that RWE has been involved in terms of the construction process, is RWE aware of any measures that can be implemented during the construction process to reduce the noise that's generated during the construction process, and in particular, associated with the pile driving process itself?
So we have two experts from our construction team providing testimony today,
Okay.
both Kevin Macklin. I believe he has a small presentation specific to pile driving and some of the noise associated with that, and also Christy Thomas, who is our director for construction in North America.
Okay. And I noted that there's a decommissioning bond that will be put in place for the solar project that was mentioned in one of your slides that you presented earlier. Is there a formal decommissioning plan that's been developed for this particular project?
So at this point, we do not have a formal decommissioning plan, as we have not completed final engineering for the project. But there will be one put into place prior to operation.
Okay.
And I think, again, Kevin Macklin from our construction team or Christy Thomas from our construction team can speak more generally to our decommissioning processes.
Okay. But there will be a formal decommissioning plan that's put in place whenever the engineering aspect of the construction has been fully developed?
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay. And then with respect to the decommissioning bond, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
So that is a just general requirement under the conditions of our lease or our leases. I believe that there is an industry standard on the calculation of how that bond is maintained. In general terms, there is a cost for decommissioning that is subtracted by the salvage value. There is a requirement every 5 years to have a licensed engineer in which in the state in which the project is located that reassesses those costs, and the bond is recalculated on the anniversary of every 5 years.
Okay. And you said that that was a requirement for, if this touches any confidential information, just let me know. You said that that was a requirement for the lease agreements that Ashwood Solar has entered into with respect to the proposed facility?
That is correct.
Okay. Those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I hesitate to say that I don't know whether Robin Hurst is Mr. Robin Hurst or Miss Robin Hurst. I have friends, both male and female, whose first name is Robin, so I see Miss Hurst. What we've done in these hearings is sort of go in reverse order and give the local representative and county judge executive the first opportunity to ask questions, and then we'll go up the line and I'll ask questions last. So, Ms. Hurst, do you have any questions to ask of this witness?
No, sir, I do not.
Okay, thank you. Judge Executive White, do you have any questions for the witness?
I don't have any questions. I just want to speak on what Mr. McNeely spoke on earlier. He said that we had 4 areas of concern that were around people's homes. I did visit all of those people that had concerns and spoke with them personally, along with the magistrate Quinn Sutton. One of them we eliminated as a concern. It was so far over a hill that they couldn't visually see it from their home. So the other three, we went and visited with them, walked it off, tried to figure out how far we needed to get away from the home in order to satisfy the homeowner. And we sent it to Mr. McNeely, and they, of course, drew up the 3 red zones that showed where they would not put panels. And I went back and visited each one of those homeowners, and they were satisfied with that. So the things that he was expressing during his testimony, I vouch for those things. Those took place. And right now I know of no other landowner that has issues as far as distance from their home.
Thank you. Mr. Rowland, questions?
I don't have any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lyons?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just a couple. Good morning, Mr. McNeely. Just regarding the Phase 1 assessment of the property, I noticed that there were indications of some solid waste and sinkholes. I don't know where those are located on the property, whether that would be in or around array settings, but does the company, does Ashwood Solar plan on cleaning any of that up, or do you consider that's still just the responsibility of the property owner?
Again, I'll defer to Josh Adams from Stantec as he performed the Phase 1 ESA. But my understanding is that there were no wrecks associated with any of those findings.
Right.
They were mostly small debris, some I think gasoline cans, some other items. And then any other remediation efforts that would be required, I think we defer to our construction team being led by Kevin Macklin.
Okay, thank you. I know that the Department for Environmental Protection responded to your all's cumulative environmental assessment and noted a couple of things in there, particularly karst and the groundwater protection plan. The one thing that I would reiterate is what was in the last part of the letter about it's a recommendation, obviously not a regulatory requirement, to run the Kentucky Biological Assessment Tool for sensitive endangered species. We've been trying to make sure that everybody that's doing these developments runs that tool to make sure, really for your own protection, that you're not getting into areas where there might be sensitive populations such as bats and that roost in trees and things like that. The only other question I have is, and I know that the commission addressed this in one of their data requests about the actual acreage, but yet I'm still confused. I noticed in the public notice it said 900 acres, but the area that was responded to in the data request was 1,500 or so. And I've seen several different measurements, even some over 2,000. So what is the exact acreage we're talking about? Was the 900 just for the solar arrays out of the 1,500, or just need a little clarification on that?
Sure, I think that's a good question. To give some context, so the site itself, so the leases in which we are seeking the permit to construct on total the 1,500 acres, or just north of 1,500 acres. When we say 900 acres, we are talking about covered solar panels within that. Some of that is due to, some existing floodplain within the project site, so we're trying to stay out of the floodplain. There's other areas that have, exhibited karst sinkholes, essentially. So that's why you see the discrepancy between that. There's been some other numbers, to your point, of a much larger area. So in the initial development of this project, we've actually signed up additional acreage that is not included in the proposed project boundary for the Ashwood Solar One project. So there's some areas that extend into Caldwell County. And I think that that's where the discrepancy is on that acreage in particular. But specific to the Ashwood Solar One project, it is just the 1,500 acres that is, wholly located within Lyon County. And then the 900 acres, just to reiterate, is for the coverage of solar panels.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Chandler, questions?
Yeah, thank you. Mr. McGeely, what's the status of the pilot agreement?
So we have not formally proposed our inducement resolution to the judge executive. We are exploring using an industrial revenue bond via a pilot on the project. We have retained Dinsmore as counsel and have a inducement resolution in hand. We have learned, I think, prior to providing that to the judge executive, we've learned of some, I would call it maybe a policy change at the finance cabinet, specific to requiring pilots to maintain 100% of local school taxes throughout their life. So right now we're in an exploratory phase of understanding exactly what that would look like financially in order to ensure that the amounts we're proposing underneath the pilot and the industrial revenue bond can address that concern from the state.
Let me just ask, what is it your intention to enter in? Is it your intention to enter into an agreement with the county on that issue?
We would like to, yes.
Okay. And have you all identified, absent the school taxes or the payments to the school system, have you identified what your expected or anticipated payment to the county would be under the IRB?
I think that's to be determined based on the exploration of federal taxes and liability underneath the school taxes and others.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. McNeely.
Mr. McNeely, I know that, I think I heard you say that you met, or did you actually meet with any of these homeowners about whom these accommodations were made or changes in your construction plan? Were you present when they were talked to?
Unfortunately, no, sir. So we have, just due to ongoing issues with COVID-19, we still have strong corporate restrictions on overnight travel. I'm not physically located in a position where I can drive within a day and be back home. So we asked both the judge executive and the magistrate to be our liaison in those meetings. We thought it was important that they serve those local constituents, that they could properly address that on our behalf.
And I don't know, of course, Judge White is a member of the siding board. I don't feel comfortable asking him questions, but maybe we will. Look, before the Judge White was given the, I guess, opportunity to go out and talk to these non-participating local residents, do you know if the judge was told specifically about what the noise levels would be at these homes? Do you know that?
Our concerns with the judge were specific to view shed issues, sir.
Were with what, sir?
To view shed issues. I don't think we addressed noise, and we have not heard any complaints of noise from any of the neighbors.
You know what the studies, or apparently what your own noise studies show about the noise levels at this one home that's 126 feet from the property boundary, don't you? They have a decibel level from the pile driving at 92.8, which apparently is the equivalent of a motorcycle engine or a an underground or a subway train motor. And those levels are in excess of what I guess your studies or what your position is that the Center for Disease Control says can cause hearing damage. I'm just wondering, I know you've got other people, and you're probably not the one to answer this question, but I'm sure Mr. Osterloh and Mr. Gardner have told you that my main concern on all of these cases is noise levels as they pertain to homeowners close by. You've got a subdivision here that's 338 feet from the properties, and I understand that people would say, I don't want to, you can put up some vegetation to screen my home from these places. But if I can't go into my home and have a reasonable day or evening of pleasure because of what I just noise levels, I think that's a problem. So I won't ask you any more questions about it, but somewhere along the line, I think the company has to address these noise levels. But having said that, I'm interested in your bonding on decommissioning. Now, I've read your leases, and your leases provide that absent a governmental authority, I guess in so many words, being the enforcing agent of the bond, the only people who would be able to enforce the terms of a decommissioning bond would be the landowner at the time that the project was completed. Is that correct?
To the best of my knowledge, that is correct.
Okay. Well,
And I can maybe add to that all of our participating landowners in the project are expecting that bond be put into
I know,
place.
but that would be each individual landowner who would be 30 years or more, so whenever the project ended, may or may not be the same landowner or the same family that now leases the premises, correct?
I guess in theory that would
I
be
mean,
correct.
that's obviously correct. The leases provide that that your company has basically the unlimited right to assign all of its right, title, and interest in the premises, in the leasehold premises, and in the operating equipment and the operation to a third party, and that the landowner will have no recourse for any alleged violation against the assignee. Isn't that correct?
I would have to,
All right,
Take a
well,
look.
I'll just say that it is, and then Mr. Osterloh or Mr. Gardner can correct me later if it isn't. The reason I say this is, and I don't mean it to be, jump on you or be unduly critical. I understand why that provision would be in there. But for Judge White's perspective and Ms. Hurst, all I would say was if I was a local government, I'd want that bond basically to be enforceable by county government or some governmental agency so that I could see that the property in my county was basically restored to its approximate condition rather than leaving it to a group of individual landowners who may or may not ever actually get to see the lease after 30 years or who may not have the wherewithal or the sophistication to be able to see that the property is properly decommissioned. Having said that, I have no further questions. Mr. Osterloh, do you have any direct of your witness?
I do not have any redirect, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Nguyen, anybody else, any questions?
Nothing further from me, Your Honor.
Judge White, do you have, I'm going to, otherwise we won't know it till we have our final discussion on this. Were you aware of the noise studies and what the noise levels would be during construction and then after construction during operation of the facility at some of these homes that are close by?
There's been just minimal discussion on the noise levels. I've been told that The noise would be happening for about 3 months, would be the construction time in different areas. But I didn't have enough information in order to explain that to the people out there. And I don't know if that's going to be a problem as where they're backed up to now or not.
No, I wanted to know because the noise has always become, as an old defense lawyer, I've defended a lot of companies on noise claims. And so I understand how they can affect local property owners. And you heard the old saying, happy wife, happy life. And if you get somebody in your family that can't stand a great deal of noise or a continuous hum or buzz, it can be a problem. And so all I'm saying is that I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of the potential noise issues during construction and perhaps some after construction's over at some of these places. And that's all. And
Well,
I just think we need to address it.
I would like to ask that. I didn't know there was noise levels that people would be able to hear after construction.
Okay.
I'd like to know a little bit about that. And I'd also like to know a little bit about the what was being discussed as far as the bond for when all this is over, how does it get returned to the land that it was?
Well, I think, and we can discuss that among ourselves, or somebody from the solar company can discuss it if they choose to, that the lease basically provides that a bond, I think, enforceable by a governmental entity will be, basically will be executed, but if not, in favor of the individual landowners. And I think my experience has been that government, this is one area where government can best serve the interest of the community as opposed to an individual landowner, especially 30 years out when the project is probably over. But in any event, that was my question. Do you have, Judge White or Ms. Hurst, do you have any questions of Mr. McNeely based on what we've been talking about?
I do not.
I suppose my question would be the noise level once construction is over.
And Mr. Chairman and Judge White, I believe that Josh Adams is probably going to be able to respond to those questions.
Okay, all right, thank you. Then we'll wait for that presentation. All right, is there any reason why Mr. McNeely can't be excused?
No, Your Honor.
Hey, Mr. McNeely, thank you for your testimony. You may step down and you're excused. Thank you again. Mr. Osterloh, do you have another witness?
Thank you all for your
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess since we talked about noise, particularly during construction, our next witness will be able to address those questions. Kevin Macklin.
Okay. All right, Mr. Macklin, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Osterloh?
Thank you. Mr. Macklin, would you please state your name for the record?
Kevin Macklin.
What is your business title and for whom do you work?
I work for RWE. I'm a senior project manager of project delivery.
What's your business address?
701 Brazos Street, Suite 1400, Austin, Texas, 78701.
Can you describe what your role is with this Ashwood Solar project?
So I'm the senior project manager overseeing the construction aspect of the project from start of construction all the way through commercial operation.
And as you know, the siting board has had lots of questions regarding noise and specifically, I guess, the pile driving during construction. Can you provide some more information to the siting board on this topic?
Yeah, certainly. So I prepared a quick presentation with respect to the pile driving as it typically takes place on these construction of the PV solar farms.
And Mr. Macklin, just for the benefit of everyone here, can you just explain to us in context what the pile driving process is, why it's needed during the construction process?
Certainly. So the pile driving process is driving our steel piles, which is the foundations of the trackers of which the PV solar modules are mounted to for the operation of the plant. The reason why we use pile driving as a means for doing this is it's a efficient way where you can not disturb the underlying soils to the extent practical, where massive amounts of concrete or other means to secure the foundation is needed. We use the native soils there to use as the cohesive grip to the piles, to which they will not be uprooted. So to kind of address the noise aspect from a pile driving perspective, we have some approximations here that what you can expect at the property line with equal distances, first here being approximately 84 decibels at 50 feet from the property line. I do want to point out that this is not a continuous noise, as it's intermittent for the pile driving aspect. Typically, the pile driver for one pile will take anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute and a half to drive the pile to its final resting place. And as you can see, as we gradually get further away from the property line, the decibel levels increase pretty significantly. The further away, obviously, the lower the decibel levels. As pointed out earlier, there is a table here that shows the common outdoor activities based off of noise levels. Showing about the 84 decibel level, we're close to a gas lawnmower or a diesel truck driving down the road. And then as we get further away, those noise levels decrease. Just kind of grabbed a couple focal points where, some of the nearest properties are to our solar farm where we plan to install piles. Here at focal point A, this particular residence was referenced earlier in this presentation to the PSC. We're showing roughly 365 feet from the property line, which equates to roughly 68 decibels. That can fluctuate based off of various factors, but that's a good average. As mentioned earlier, we have actually increased this buffer to around this residence, so this would actually be even further when we get into some of the more detailed engineering phases of the project. The next focal point was where I felt that was a close to the property line boundary. This is not to the home residence. This is the property line. And we're looking at roughly 74 decibels, and this being one of the worst offenders in the project of the noise constraint here. To kind of address the timing of the pile install and duration, approximately 10 weeks of pile installation will take place across the project. We move in a snake type path throughout the project, and as we install these piles, we'll get further away from property lines as well as get closer again, and then further away. We'll obviously take best care to minimize distractions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Macklin. Does that complete your initial remarks on noise?
Yes, Mr. Ashwood.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, probably appropriate now for questions to be asked to Mr. Macklin.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Nguyen, questions?
Yeah, just a couple. So you indicated the timeline would take about 10 weeks to finish the pile driving installation, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And during the day, during that 10-week period, what would be the hours in which the pile driving process would occur?
So on a typical day, depending weather, obviously, it's a big impact we would be working 7 p.m. or 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And with respect to any of the local ordinances with respect to construction noise.
Are there any Lyon County ordinance that deals with noise?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And so from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. would be the hours on a typical day for, and this is just with respect to the pile driving process. Would that be throughout the week, or is that during the weekday, or what days?
Yes, that would be, that could be up to 7 days a week.
Okay. And do you foresee typically working on the weekends as well, or just during the weekday?
Typically, no work on the weekends, but we do work some weekends just based off of schedule, missed days due to weather, et cetera.
Okay. And I had asked a question to Ms. McNeely earlier with respect to, are you aware of any, or if RWE is aware of any measures, either equipment or methods that can be implemented to reduce the noise generated, particularly by a pile driver equipment during the construction process?
Yeah, there are some means and methods, but none have been considered at this time for this project.
So what are those means or methods?
In the past, I've seen what they use semi trailers, about 52 feet long, with special shrouds that go over them to help dampen the noises. These trailers would be moving along with the pile drivers as they progress through the project.
And how much of a reduction in noise would that measure create?
I do not have that information.
Okay. And you say you've seen these done. Did you witness them physically? Were you personally there, or were you watching videos of them?
Not me personally, but other colleagues within my company has used these in the past.
Okay. And do you know the reason why those were used, that particular method was used?
I do not.
Okay.
Christy Thomas may be able to speak on that a little more brief.
Okay. Any other measures that you're aware of?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Ms. Hurst, any questions?
No, sir, he answered the ones I had when he described the times and the days of the week.
Okay, thank you. Judge Executive White, questions?
Maybe I missed it. Was there discussion on the noise level after construction?
I don't think there was a discussion. Mr. Macklin, can you address noise levels at some of these sites after construction? In other words, during normal operation of the facility?
Or Chairman Schmidt, or Mr. Macklin, is it you that would be the better witness, or would you defer that to Josh Adams?
Well, whoever you think would be the best witness, Mr. Osterloh. So let's just
I think,
wait. We can wait on that and get the next witness, Judge White, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think Mr. Adams will be best suited.
Mr. Judge White, we would defer that question to Josh Adams.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rowland, questions?
I do not have any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lyons, questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Vice Chairman Chandler?
I do have a question. I'm gonna ask it. I assume you're gonna ask it, so I'll go ahead and ask it, Chairman, just to make sure it gets on there. Mr. Macklin, have you been around a construction site or these construction sites that do this camping in anticipation of solar facilities?
Can you rephrase the question?
Yeah. Do you have experience during the construction phase with the tamping or the pile driving in these solar facilities?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware of any mechanism or process that can dampen the noise emitted during this pile driving?
No, not from the machine, or if you're referring to a machine aspect, no.
Okay. So what other aspects can dampen the noise impact of the tamping or pile driving?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Macklin.
Commissioner Matthews, questions?
I don't have any questions.
Mr. Macklin, I've read the company's noise study, and I mean, I think it's obvious that the noise levels at some of these places, particularly the home that's 126 feet away, are louder than any other solar generating facility that we had an opportunity to consider to date. I mean, in looking at page 7 of the noise study, it talks about noise level at nearest receptor, right, including pile driver, 92.8 decibels. Then noise level at nearest receptor without the pile driver, 78.1. And the information that you all have presented is that noise levels above 70 decibels can be basically detrimental to hearing. Now, so, I mean, we want to see you be successful. At the same time, we want to see that local residents, especially those who have absolutely no financial interest in the facility, are protected in the quiet and enjoyment of their homes. So I think there ought to be a way that your company can protect these people at a reasonable cost, and at what your investment is in the facility, whatever it would take to put one of these trailers or whatever else may be available to protect the homeowners is well worth the price. I know you said you didn't know why these trailers were used, but I suspect that the reason they were used is because the jackhammers, pile drivers, were causing a lot of noise that basically residents at these other places where facilities were being constructed wouldn't tolerate or shouldn't have to tolerate. So do you know if your employer would have any objection to essentially, or any reason not to agree to basically implement some measures, or one like you've suggested that you've known existed in the past, to basically try to reduce noise levels during construction at properties that might be affected? Obviously, you might not have to do that throughout the whole project, but ones that would reduce the decibel level to something much lower than 92.8 or 78.
Mr. Chairman, I think during construction, and specifically speaking to the pile driving aspect of construction, I believe that my company would take that into consideration.
Well, I mean, if we required it, I suppose maybe you'd have a little more, be more serious about taking it into consideration. I have no further questions. Mr. Osterloh, do you have anything?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Nguyen, anyone else?
Nothing further, Chairman.
Okay. May this witness be excused?
Yes.
Mr. Macklin, you may be excused. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, everybody.
Mr. Osterloh, you want to put on your next witness on noise?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We'll call Christy Thomas.
Okay, Ms. Thomas, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You may ask, Mr. Osterloh.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Thomas. Can you state your name for the record?
Ms. Thomas, we can't hear you. Can you hear Mr. Osterloh? We can't.
I cannot hear Ms. Thomas.
I think I'm having technical difficulties.
Oh,
There,
now
now
we
we can
can
hear
hear. All right, you're coming through plain now. Thank you. Well, no. We
Okay,
can no
we'll see if-
longer hear you for some reason.
Can you guys hear me now?
We can. It's soft.
I'm away from my computer. I couldn't get onto the phone, so I'm hoping that you guys can hear me better now.
Yes, I
No.
believe so.
Okay.
We can't hear well enough to understand any testimony she might give.
Now it appears she may be frozen.
Okay, well, we can wait.
Let's see, what's your pleasure, Mr. Chairman? Ms. Thomas can talk a little bit more about, if we can get her, talk a little bit more about the construction noise, or we can move on to another witness and see if Ms. Thomas can correct her technical issues.
I don't know if there's anything we can do here to help out or not. There isn't, we don't think. Okay. I'll tell you what, why don't we, it's 20 after 10, why don't we take a 10-minute recess and then come back and see if we can get Ms. Thomas audio, and if we can't, then we'll go to somebody else. All right, fair enough? We'll be in recess until 10:30. Thank you. Okay, looks like we're back on the record. Mr. Osterloh, have we been able to fix Ms. Thomas's audio?
I believe so as of 2 or 3 minutes ago, but let's check. Ms. Thomas, you there?
Yes, can you guys hear me now?
Wow, thank you. Hey, it sounds good now. All right, Mr. Osterloh, you may ask.
Okay, and thank you, Ms. Thomas. As you heard before, you are under oath based on the chairman swearing you in. Can you please state your name for the record?
Yes, it's Christy Thomas.
And what is your business title and for whom do you work?
So I work for RWE, and my title is Vice President of Construction and Project Management for Solar.
What's your business address?
20 California Street, San Francisco, California, 94111.
And can you describe briefly your role with this Ashwood Solar project?
Sure. So I lead the construction and project management team that will be building this project on behalf of Ashwood.
And Mr. Chairman, I think that Ms. Thomas is available for the follow-up questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Nguyen, questions?
Yes, just a couple of follow-up questions, Ms. Thomas. Good morning.
Good morning.
Questions that I had for Mr. Macklin regarding the semi-trailer canvas method that's used to reduce the noise, and I'm assuming that's regarding the pile driving process. Do you recall that question?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And I'd also asked, what the reason behind the implementation of that particular method. And Mr. Macklin deferred that question to you to see if you're aware. So do you know the reason behind why a company would implement, this particular semi-canvas method in order to reduce the noise associated with the pile driving process?
Yes, sir. It was used on previous projects, basically to shield or buffer an adjacent property from either the view of the pile driving activities that were going on, as well as for buffering for noise.
Okay. So, are you pretty aware, is this a common method that's used to reduce noise during the pile driving process?
It is.
Okay. And has RWE implemented this type of measure in other solar projects that it's conducted, not only here in the U.S., but globally?
We have not.
Okay. Those are all the questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hurst, questions?
I have none for Ms. Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you. Judge White, questions?
Not along those lines. I think, was it Josh Adams that was going to answer the long-term? Okay. No, haven't done.
Mr. Rowland, questions?
I do not have any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lyons?
No questions, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Vice Chairman Chandler?
No questions.
Dr. Matthews?
Make it unanimous, no questions.
I can't resist. How did you learn of this method, Ms. Thomas? I mean, if RWE hadn't used it, are you aware of other companies who have?
Yes, my previous experience before joining RWE, I worked for a large EPC contractor, and we implemented it several times on projects that I was responsible for the construction of.
Okay. I mean, and one of the reasons, as you've stated, is for using that equipment was reduced noise, as well as perhaps the view, correct?
Yeah, the noise that we were addressing, though, was actually at a closer range than what we're speaking about here. It was, property boundaries, like right up against the start of construction or, within a much closer proximity than what we're discussing here on this particular project. In every instance that we've used these in the past, it was at a closer proximity. But yes, that is correct.
Well, I mean, you'd admit it, you've read the noise study, correct? Have you read the noise study? 92.8 decibels is a level exceeding, I guess, what it says in your the noise study as CDC's guidelines for what can cause hearing damage, correct?
I'm not an expert in that, but yes.
Well, apparently they're not. We've had, in all of the cases we've had, now we have CDC guidelines here. We had one last week and they used the World Health Organization. And prior to that, there was a 1974 Environmental Protection Agency study that had the acceptable decibel levels at 55 or below. So I don't know what the answer is, except I think it may be like somebody said, some Supreme Court justice said about pornography. I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. I mean, we all know how loud a jackhammer or a pile driver can be. I have no further questions of this witness. Mr. Osterloh, any questions?
Nothing further.
Okay, anything further, Mr.
I
Mooney?
do just one additional question. Ms. Thomas, are you aware of any other measures or methods other than the one that you've mentioned in terms of reducing noise for pile driving than the semi-canvas method?
Yeah, so there are two methods that are typically used in construction for this type of abatement. One is sound blankets that are used on the fencing at the perimeter of the site to dampen noise directly. The semi method is a little bit more portable because we move the semis along the perimeter of the project to the area where it's directly affected by the pile driving. So it's a little bit easier constructability wise to move those trailers on the site. So either of those are the two methods that I've used in the past.
Okay. And which one would be more effective relatively compared to the other?
They're generally about the same effectiveness, or they've been rated the same effectiveness. Either of them will work. The semi has a little bit more effect when they are in place because it actually acts as a buffer for visual as well as the noise, and they're a bit taller than just the perimeter fence line.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And do you know how much noise reduction is created by the semi-canvas method?
I do not off the top of my head, no.
Okay. Okay.
Is that something you could find out? I'm sure there must be data available.
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we can do a post-hearing data request.
Yeah, we can do that. Thank you, Your Honor. Those are all the questions I have.
Anyone,
Mr. Chairman.
before I ask you, Mr. Ross, let me ask if anybody else on the panel here would like to ask a question. That gives you the opportunity to finish up with anything else. Anyone else? Judge White, Ms. Hurst? Okay.
Mr.
All right,
Chairman.
Mr. Osterloh, redirect. Mr. Rowland, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Ms. Thomas, I may have missed this, but I was on a site visit for this. As far as the semis, has that been tested as feasible? Because I know there's some very small roads, or not very wide roads, and the hill is kind of like a rolling topography. Do we know, have we confirmed that it would work for this site?
Yeah, I mean, so when we come in and grade a project site, we'll grade it. So we won't be utilizing roads to actually move these trailers across roads. We will be moving them across land to get them at the property boundary. So they're empty semi trailers. They're not an actual semi, and they're moved by a forklift to put them into place because they're empty. They're fully empty. But they act as a sound baffle because there's nothing inside of them for the sound to reverberate off of. It reverberates internally and then bounces back to the project site. It doesn't actually, kind of move outside the property boundary when they're placed at the property boundary. So we move them relatively easily within the site, once the site has been graded.
Okay, thanks for the explanation.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, before Mr. Oslo gets his last chance here, anything else, Mr. Lyons? Anyone else, any questions? No, sir. All right, Mr. Oslo, redirect.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas, I think it was Mr. Macklin that mentioned about a approximate 10-week period where some of this tamping would occur. Is that 10 weeks all at the same location that would be closest to the property, or how does that work in terms of progress of construction?
Absolutely. No, it's actually a much shorter period of time. We move through the project site per the exhibit that Mr. Macklin had shared previously. And Kevin, I don't know if you could bring that up so I can explain this in a little bit more detail. That exhibit that shows the color coordination of where the piles will be driven.
Mr. Macklin, are you still available? Ah, there we go.
Should be up.
Yeah, so for those on the call, this lower bottom right-hand corner, it's a light purple color. That's pretty much where we will start our pile driving activities and then move like the serpentine from the purple up to the aqua greenish color up at the very northernmost section. So, if you take kind of the color coordinated sections and divide each one into the 10 weeks, it's an approximation of a roughly about 2 to 3 weeks adjacent to a property line within those sections that are of concern. So it's not a continuous 10 weeks at the property line at that person's home where the construction will be taking place. It's a much shorter period of time. And we would move any sound abatement that we're looking potentially to have here. We would move that with our pile driving machines as they move throughout the project. We would move our sound abatement with them. They would not be stationary for the full duration of the pile driving at one location. They will be moved and utilized to buffer any sound as needed.
And am I correct that in any one of those sections, you mentioned roughly 2 or 3 weeks, that you would essentially start at one location and then either work away from or towards the property boundary, but it wouldn't be a constant 2 or 3 weeks at the exact same location in the exact section of the color coordinated area?
That's correct. Yeah, we would start essentially at the property line. As an example, the reddish orange that is in relation to that property that's kind of jutting into the in the middle of the section, or even the aqua property, the aqua portion that's adjacent to the home that's like a little bit north. We would work closest to the property boundary out from there. So it would be a relatively short period of time that we would be adjacent to the property line in those areas.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Any other questions from anyone else?
No, none for me.
If not, may Ms. Thomas be excused?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. You may be excused.
Thank you.
Mr. Oslo, do you have another
Thank you.
witness?
Yes, we'll call Josh Adams.
Mr. Adams,
Good morning.
good morning. I don't, your video isn't on, so maybe you're not available by video. Oh, okay, there you are.
It took a minute.
All right. Will you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Oslo?
Good morning, Mr. Adams. Can you please state your name for the record?
Good morning, Joshua Adams.
And what is your business title and for whom do you work?
I'm a principal of environmental services at Stantec Consulting,
What is your business address?
10509 Timberwood Circle, Suite 100, Louisville.
And what is your role with this Ashwood Solar project?
I have overseen all the environmental sound noise traffic studies that were part of the project and permit application.
And just for clarification, I know there's been reference to one noise receptor or maybe its property boundary being close to 92 decibels. Are you familiar with that?
I am.
And that's one of the projects that was recently, the company recently agreed to move further away from the solar panels, or the solar panels would be kept further away from that residence, correct?
Yes, as far as I know, that's correct.
Okay. And I'm sure you're going to get more specific questions from everyone else, but can you briefly describe the operational sound that will be emitted from this project and give an idea of what that would sound like?
Yeah, of course. With solar generation, there's essentially two sound generators inside the facility. One would be the tracking motors that actually tilt the panels to track the sun. The other would be the inverters, which invert the power so it can be sold to the grid. The tracking motors only run about 1 minute every 15 minutes, and they are roughly 78 decibels at the source. The closest tracking motor currently proposed is over 500 feet away, so that noise generation would be substantially less at the nearest receptor. And then the inverters, they are very similar. They emit a low hum, a constant low hum that are very similar to household air conditioners that are about 67 decibels, just about 30 feet away. So at the nearest receptor, we're looking at about 49 decibels, which is lower than a normal conversation.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Adams is available for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Nguyen, questions?
Just a couple. Good morning, Mr. Adams. You mentioned that the inverters emit a constant hum, and the noise level is 67 dBA at the source. Was that your testimony?
The 67 dBA, roughly 32 feet from the source.
Okay, 32 feet from the source. And you mentioned that the closest residential property would experience a sound of 49 dBA, correct? You there, Mr. Adams?
Well, 395 feet from the nearest inverter.
Okay. So the closest residential property is 395 feet from an inverter?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And at that distance, the noise will be at 49 dBA decibels?
The 49 dBA is 164 feet, so the noise will be even lower than 49 at that distance.
Do you know what that noise level would be at 395 feet?
Unfortunately, not off the top of my head, no.
Okay. And just a couple of other questions confirming the distance. And that may have changed now because of the change in the location of the panels, but so the closest non-participating residential property from a proposed solar facility would have been 126 feet. Is that correct? Prior to this change?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And then with respect to the Breezy Loop neighborhood, that's on the southern part of the project site.
That's correct.
Do you know what the closest, the distance of the closest residential home within that neighborhood from the project boundary?
From the project boundary was 35 feet.
35 feet? Okay.
Yes.
What about from the nearest solar panel?
338 feet.
Okay. So are you familiar with the final, well, the site layout map that was provided as part of the application?
I am, yes.
Okay. So on that map, it shows for the Breezy Loop neighborhood of a setback of at least 250 feet. Do you recall that?
I do, yes.
Okay. So is that 250 feet from, what distance is that 250 feet from?
That's from the revised fence line.
Okay. So it's from the fence line to
That's correct.
to the closest residential property.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Those are all the questions I have. Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Hurst, questions?
No.
Judge White, questions?
No, I think that answers the question I needed.
Mr. Rowland,
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lyons,
No questions, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Vice Chairman Chandler,
No questions.
Dr. Matthews.
No questions.
I have no questions. Mr. Osterloh, any redirect?
Nothing further.
May Mr. Adams be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Adams, for your testimony. You may be excused. Is that all your witnesses, Mr. Osterloh, or do you have another?
We do have one more, Courtney DeHoney.
Okay.
Good morning.
Morning, Ms. Mahoney. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Osterloh?
Thank you. Good morning. Could you please state your name for the record?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Courtney DeHoney.
And what is your business title and for whom do you work?
Sure. I'm a senior associate with Stantec Consulting.
What is your business address?
It's 3001 Washington Boulevard, Suite 500 in Arlington, Virginia.
And you prepared the economic impact report for this project, correct?
I did, yes.
And just for the benefit of the siting board, that economic impact report did not include any analysis of tax revenues, correct?
That's correct. It was unclear at the time of that document what direction the RWE was going to be taking with a pilot payment or property taxes or some other option.
And as we heard earlier from Mr. McNeely, it's still uncertain at this point in time, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Honey is available for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Nguyen?
No questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Hurst?
I actually do have a question regarding the school tax revenue. Do we have any idea when we will know about that?
I don't have any information on that. Josh McNeely would be the best person to respond to that request.
Is that something that maybe we can respond to, we can provide in writing after the hearing to find out when we might have a better idea of that? Mr. Chairman or Mr.
Yes,
Nguyen?
yes, sure. Yeah, I think everybody want to know that information.
Okay.
Ms. Hurst, anything else? Okay, Judge
That was
White?
my main question. Thank you.
Thank you. Judge White?
No, sir.
Mr. Rowland?
No questions at this time, Mr. Chairman. I'm also just interested to know how those discussions regarding the school tax go.
Mr. Lyons?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chairman Chandler?
None for me, thank you.
Okay. Dr. Matthews?
I don't have any, thanks.
I have no questions either. Any redirect based on the one question we had, Mr. Osterloh?
No, Mr. Chairman.
May Mr. Honey be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Honey. You may be excused.
Sure, thank you.
Now, if that's that's the last witness, correct, Mr. Osterloh?
That is correct.
Well, I know there's going to be a few, probably not a great many, but a few post-hearing data requests. How much time do you think you'll need, Mr. Nguyen, to draft those and get them out to Mr. Osterloh?
We can get those out by Thursday.
Okay. All right, well. Okay, so that's the 13th. Mr. Osterloh, how much time do you think you'll reasonably need to have answers to some of those questions? I know there aren't going to be many, but some of them have to do, I guess, with obviously the school tax and some questions about the performance level of these sound mitigating devices. So I think it's toward the end of June, 20th, 21st, or something, when a final order must be entered. So
I believe so, the 21st. I mean, based on the post-hearing data requests that I've heard today, I don't think it'll take us very long to put them together. Although on the caveat, on the school revenue, I don't know if we're going to have an answer as to what the definitive amount is, or maybe give a projected timeline of what that might look like. But I would say we could provide written responses within 10 days or so, to the 24th or 25th of May, if that's acceptable, Mr. Chairman.
yeah, the 24th is Sunday, so the 25th would be fine. That'd be Monday, on a Monday. Let me ask this too, Mr. Osterloh. On the bond issue, I know I guess in reading the leases, your client has expressed a willingness, or I guess if there's a local government has a requirement, or some governmental agency about a bond that goes beyond just the local lessor, and I encourage Judge White and the fiscal court to take a look at that too. Maybe talk about, or be thinking about, a bond that essentially would be enforceable by a local government or some governmental agency, as opposed to a number of different landowners. And I think if it doesn't, I mean, the cost isn't any more or that much more. I don't know who will be operating the facility at the end of 30 years. Maybe RWE and maybe not. But I would just ask that you take that into consideration and talk about it, because I think the public, the taxpayers and the residents of Lyon County would probably be better served if local government had the ability to enforce a bond if necessary than individual landowners.
Okay. And so just so I'm clear, and I think you said this twice now, but I want to make sure your interest is to see whether or not our company is willing to commit that bond to the benefit of the local government as opposed to the landholders, correct?
Yes, that's the question that I had, yes.
Yeah, we can follow up with that.
Okay. Is there anything else, Mr. Osterloh, that we need to consider that you'd like to point out at this point?
Not at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I will say this for me personally. I do appreciate the fact that you had some construction people here so that we were able to get some information, and the noise consultant. I know this is a kind of I don't guess we'd ever had one of these hearings before late last year, but as we move forward, all of us can adapt to what I guess individuals see as important to them at least. And I do appreciate your having those witnesses available. I think it helps everybody in the process.
I agree, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, could I say one thing, please?
Yes, you could.
Thank you, Your Honor. To the extent that you all have the ability, we would encourage you all to try to visit a solar facility that has that is in existence, so you can hear for yourself what the inverter noise might be. And additionally, we're going to see if we can actually, able to convey what the actual pile driving noise is, so that would be available. Would those be helpful to you, Your Honor?
I think they would. It'd be nice, if you had a video, but really, an on-site visit would probably be better, and we've talked about trying to do that. In fact, we've looked at some places to where we might be able to reasonably go within a day's drive or something of Frankfurt.
And the irony is, I'm sure it's not past you, is that the pile driving is even used for construction to protect the land, so that the land will be available when either during the use of it or afterwards, so that it's not got a bunch of concrete. So that's the irony of us trying to do the right thing, and unfortunately it does take that pile driving.
Sure, I understand. I guess there are benefits and detrimental aspects to almost anything good that you try to do.
Yes, sir.
So, okay. All right, if there's nothing else, Mr. Osterloh, Mr. Gardner, we're probably ready to adjourn. Would you agree?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right, at this time, this hearing is now adjourned.